Stop talking about it and actually talk about it. You know what nobody tells you when you're building a business, leading a team, or just trying to hold your life together? That sometimes the best thing you can do is stop trying to write it all down and just talk. I recently had the privilege of sitting down with Latoya Tatum. And let me tell you something about this woman. Latoya is out here changing the game for how Black professionals and entrepreneurs show up in their work and in their lives. She's not just talking theory, she's living proof that your voice, your actual spoken voice, can be the foundation of everything you build. She's helping people understand that the words you speak, the conversations you have, the clarity you find through dialogue, those aren't just nice extras, they're the infrastructure. And in a world that keeps telling us we need the perfect business plan, the polished pitch deck, the 5-year strategy document, Latoya is saying, hold on. What if we started by just talking about it? And that's what we're diving into today. Because here's the truth that Latoya shared with me, and it hit me right in the chest. Your voice is enough, even when the words aren't on paper yet. You don't have to have the perfect script or plan to show up fully for your purpose. Speaking from a real place is powerful and valid for Black professionals and entrepreneurs. And I know some of you are sitting there thinking, but Leanne, I need structure. I need a plan. I need something tangible. And I hear you. But what if I told you that clarity can come through conversation, not just isolation? That sometimes you don't figure it out in a journal or a business plan. You figure it out by talking it out, asking better questions, and allowing your story to unfold out loud. Let me paint you a picture. Latoya Price, CEO of Trust Point Financials, founded a virtual CPA and tax advisory firm back in 2018. Now, this woman is serving high income earners, real estate professionals, investors, nonprofits, property managers all across the country. National firm, cloud based, sophisticated clients with complex needs. And you know what she told the world? Tech and IT and security, not her thing. She said it out loud. She didn't pretend, she didn't fake it till she made it in that area. She leaned into what she does best, which is talking to people, understanding their pain points, translating that into strategy, and building a team around her voice. Think about that for a second. Here's a woman who could have spent years trying to become someone she wasn't. She could have forced herself into tech boot camps, hired a bunch of consultants to teach her things that didn't light her up, and burned herself out trying to fit a mold that was never designed for her strengths. But she didn't. Latoya Price built her entire firm on conversation based leadership, clear instructions, structured meetings, constant communication with her team and her outsourcing partners. She didn't write a 100-page operations manual. First, she talked it through. Hey, she built systems like checklists and regular touch points so that what was in her head and in her voice got translated into consistent execution. And the result? TrustPoint Financials is now a trusted national firm delivering audit ready GAAP compliant reporting, strategic tax planning, IRS resolution virtually across the entire United States. She kept her overhead in check, she honored her own working style, and she did it by refusing to force herself into a mold that didn't fit. 25 years in the industry, and Latoya watched how traditional firms operated and said, nope, I'm doing this differently. I'm building a practice where I can spend more time talking to clients, understanding them, connecting with them, and I'm going to lean on partners for what doesn't match my strengths. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. That's knowing yourself well enough to build around who you actually are, not who you think you're supposed to be. And here's what I want you to hear in this. You are allowed to build success in a way that honors how you naturally communicate, whether you're more of a talker than a writer, a or you process verbally instead of quietly, you can still build a thriving career or business by designing systems, teams, and opportunities that work with, not against who you are. This isn't about being lazy or avoiding the hard work. This is about being strategic enough to know where your genius lives and brave enough to build from that place. Now, let's talk about Latoya Wright Johnson, single mom, tech professional, part time real estate agent, and she runs a YouTube channel called Real Life, Real Hustle, No Filters. And that title, that's not just branding, that's a mission statement, that's a declaration. Latoya is out here balancing single motherhood with a tech career and real estate work, navigating career growth and entrepreneurship while managing real life pressures and limited time. And instead of waiting until she had it all figured out, instead of waiting until she could write the perfect book or the perfect course, she just started talking. YouTube videos, vlogs, processing her journey in real time, sharing lessons learned, building community. She built a brand around authentic, unpolished conversation. She talks through faith, choices, and hustle instead of presenting a scripted image. And you know what happened? She created a platform where her voice, not a polished written persona, is the main vehicle for influence and impact. She resonated with viewers who see themselves in her story as a Black woman juggling multiple roles. And she confirmed something that a lot of us need to hear. Speaking honestly can be a tool for healing and direction, not just performance. Latoya intentionally branded her channel as Real Life, Real Hustle, no filters, signaling that her approach would be conversational, transparent, and rooted in her lived experience. She didn't wait to have everything figured out and perfectly written. She documented her evolution out loud. And in doing that, she gave permission to thousands of other women to do the same, to stop waiting, to stop hiding, to stop thinking that their messy, evolving in process story isn't valuable, because it is, especially for Black women balancing multiple identities. Your spoken story, even when it's messy, even when it's still unfolding, is still valuable and needed. And here's the part that gets me: how many of us are sitting on ideas, dreams, businesses, movements because we're waiting for the right words to appear on paper? How many of us have convinced ourselves that if we can't write it perfectly, we can't say it at all? How many of us have silenced our own voices because we think clarity only comes through solitude and documentation? What if that's the lie that's keeping us stuck? And then there's Latoya T. Chalmers, entrepreneur, businesswoman married to NBA player Mario Chalmers. And yes, she's known as Mario Chalmers' wife, but she has her own marketing background and her own entrepreneurial ventures. And what I love about Latoya's story is that it reminds us that behind every highlight reel is real, often verbal work, hard conversations, negotiations, emotional labor. That's what keeps everything standing. Latoya and Mario met in college through mutual friends. They built a bond based on shared values. And then his career took off: professional sports, travel, pressure, media attention. And they had to figure out how to navigate distance, stress, lifestyle pressures, public scrutiny, and a demanding schedule. And you know what they leaned on? Open communication and mutual respect. They prioritized intentional quality time, family vacations, date nights, shared activities. They kept their connection strong by talking through the shifts, by keeping communication central. And Latoya didn't lose herself in the process. She continued to cultivate her own career in entrepreneurship, showing that her voice and her purpose extend beyond her husband's platform. She built her own identity. She ventured into multiple business endeavors, and together they pursued community oriented and family centered initiatives, strengthening both their partnership and their public impact. What Latoya T. Chalmers shows us is that successful partnership and leadership at home are built on spoken truth, not just a pretty narrative. It's built on the willingness to have the hard conversations, to negotiate, to do the emotional labor, to talk it through, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's not just true in marriage, that's true in business, that's true in leadership, that's true in every area of life where we're trying to build something real and sustainable. So here's what I want you to take away from Latoya Tatum's insights and from these stories. First, your voice is enough, even when the words aren't on paper yet. You don't have to have the perfect script or plan to show up fully for your purpose. Speaking from a real place is powerful and valid. Second, clarity can come through conversation, not just isolation. Sometimes you don't figure it out in a journal or a business plan. You figure it out by talking it out, asking better questions, and allowing your story to unfold out loud. And third, you are allowed to build success in a way that honors how you naturally communicate. Whether you're more of a talker than a writer, or you process verbally instead of quietly, you can still build a thriving career or business by designing systems, teams, and opportunities that work with, not against, who you are. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, okay, Leanne, this sounds great, but what do I actually do with this? So let me give you 3 things you can do this week. First, give yourself permission to process out loud. Choose one area of your life or business you've been keeping in your head or only on paper and have a real conversation about it this week with a friend, a mentor, a therapist, a coach, or even a voice note to yourself. Just talk it out. Second, create a talk space in your routine. That could be a weekly check in with your partner, a standing call with an accountability buddy, or a monthly CEO day where you literally talk through your goals, fears, and next steps instead of only writing them. And third, honor your natural communication style. If you know you're a talker, redesign one process like planning, strategy, or content creation. So it starts with you speaking, then gets captured, refined, or implemented by you or your team afterward. Because here's what I want you to feel as you're listening to this. I want you to feel seen, especially if you're a Black professional or entrepreneur who's felt wrong or unprofessional for needing to talk things out instead of always having polished documents. I want you to feel relieved, like a weight has been lifted because you realize you don't have to become someone else to be successful. You can build from who you are. I want you to feel energized and courageous, ready to have that overdue conversation. Ask for what you need, tell the truth about where you are, and use your voice in rooms where you've been quiet. And I want you to feel grounded, clear that talking it out is not chaos. It can be a powerful, structured, and sacred part of your growth, leadership, and healing. In this soft girl era, we talk a lot about dropping the cape, about releasing the need to be strong all the time, about learning to say no without guilt, about setting boundaries without apology, about resting without explanation. And all of that requires us to use our voices, to speak up, to speak out, to speak truth, to speak softly when we need to, and to speak boldly when we need to, but to speak. And I think that's what Latoya Tatum is reminding us, that our voices, our actual spoken voices, are tools of transformation. They're tools of clarity, they're tools of connection, they're tools of healing. And we don't have to wait until we have it all written down perfectly to use them. We can start right now, right where we are, with what we know, with what we feel, with what we're still figuring out. So here's my challenge to you: not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready. Today, right now. I want you to pick up the phone. I want you to send that voice note. I want you to schedule that conversation you've been avoiding. I want you to stop waiting for permission, stop waiting for perfection, stop waiting for the right words to magically appear on a page, because they won't. The clarity you're seeking, it's on the other side of you opening your mouth and speaking your truth out loud. What if the business idea you've been journaling about for 2 years finally takes shape the moment you talk it through with someone who gets you? What if the relationship conflict you've been silently carrying gets resolved the second you have the courage to say what you really feel? What if the career pivot you've been afraid to make becomes clear the moment you stop writing pros and cons lists and start having honest conversations with people who've walked that path? Your voice is not a rough draft. It's not a placeholder until you get the written version, right? Your voice is the main event, it's the strategy, it's the breakthrough, it's the beginning. And every single day you spend waiting to write it perfectly is a day you're robbing yourself and the people who need to hear from you. So stop talking about it and actually talk about it. Pick one thing today, one conversation, one voice note, one honest moment where you let your voice lead instead of your fear, because the world doesn't need another perfectly written plan that never gets executed. The world needs your voice, messy, real, evolving, powerful, now.